This week's guest is my girl Whitney-Gayle Benta, a trailblazing music executive with over 20 years of industry experience spanning media, technology, and recorded music. Currently serving as an advisor at Harborview Equity, Whitney was previously Chief Music Officer at Jukebox and the Global Head of Artist and Talent Relations at Spotify, where she elevated creator experiences through high-profile events and studio activations. Whitney's storied career also includes leadership roles at Def Jam, Facebook, and as a founding executive at Revolt TV. Before that, Whitney made her mark at MTV News, most notably helping Jay-Z gain UN recognition for his efforts to bring clean water to underdeveloped regions in Africa. Whitney's a proud Spelman College alum and a Delta. Let's talk more about her remarkable journey, her passion for bridging music and media, and her insights into the future of the industry on this week's episode of Mixed and Mastered. Welcome to Mixed and Mastered, the podcast where the stories of the music industry come to life. I'm Jeffrey Sledge, bringing you real conversations with the people who have shaped the sound of music. We're pulling back the curtain on what it takes to make it in the music business. These are the stories you won't hear anywhere else, told by the people who live them. This is Mixed and Mastered. We have a guest on today who a very prominent music executive. Has had a very illustrious career. It's taken her a lot of places. Whitney-Gayle Benta. How are you, Whitney?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Nice to see you.
It's good to see you.
You look very pretty today.
Thank you, Jeff.
You don't have to roll your eyes. That wasn't just just be nice. Be nice.
Whatever.
So let's start at the beginning. So you are Harlem born and raised.
Harlem born and raised.
How was that? How was that growing up?
It was great. You know, I come from a family that has been excuse me, let me start over. I've been in a family, I was born to a family rather, that has been really integrated in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Birth. We have a family funeral home that's been around for nearly a century.
It's been almost 100 years.
100 years. Yeah, 2028 will make 100 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was that long. Jesus
yeah, 2028 will be our centennial. So, you know, for me, understanding the value of the community and what Harlem means is always been a part of my life because of our family's, importance to the community of serving the community. So, yeah.
So you're like a legit Harlem princess.
I don't know if I'd say that, but okay.
I mean, yeah, you like your family has, touched a lot of lives in the community, and still is touching a lot of lives in the community, so people know who you are, and that's real. That's real. That's real. So tell me, like, before we get into the music thing, like, tell me what was it like, or what is it like, because it's not over with, to be in the funeral home business, because it's like you're helping people send their ancestors on, so it's not always a uplifting moment. So how was that energy like, helping people get through those dark times? It's, especially, COVID and all kind of things have happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think from a perspective of a child growing up as a kid, crazy enough, it was our playground. It was a small family business that everybody played a part, whether you were a funeral director, an embalmer, our parents were doing services. And so sometimes it was the secretary or the receptionist that ended up having to be our babysitter. So that's where we played hide and go seek, I mean, as morbid as it kind of sounds, it was like, that was the safe place, but it also, gave me an early understanding of business and decorum. And, so we knew if a family was showing up, whether it was to make arrangements or first viewing, we had to cut the silliness out. And, this is business. But I think something for me that has helped me just in terms of my adulthood is just being a lot more empathetic, being able to really put myself in the shoes of other people and being able to understand their pain.
Yeah.
and at such a young age, whether it was unfortunately seeing maybe a child that passed from stillbirth or things like that, or definitely growing up in the 80s, I had a lot of cases of
Yeah, crack and drugs and all that
and
stuff.
stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
So, I think it just put a different lens on me than I think most kids would. But I
yeah.
can't say that it was so different because that was all I knew.
Yeah.
So I guess in my mind, it was like everybody has a funeral home or something like that, that they went to. But it was really just about having a business, and really understanding what it meant to run a business and being able to see that firsthand, I think has been super invaluable.
Okay. Okay. So you graduate high school and you go to Spelman College at that time or Spelman University?
It's always film in college.
Oh, I thought it turned into I thought it changed into university.
Now it's we're the number one HBCU for 18 years
Here
running.
we go. Here we go. The number one what now? I'll let you say it again, please.
The number one HBCU for 18 years running.
Yes, Spelman's a great school. It's a great school. It turns out a lot of quality people, a lot of quality women.
Exactly.
Yes. So what made you pick Spelman?
Well, so my brother and my older cousin, are 4 years older than me.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother went to Morehouse. My cousin went to Spelman. And so during their time in school, I got a chance to go down all the time, to visit and things of that nature. And they were having a great time, And then I also have another cousin who was 4 years older than my other cousin who went to Spelman, and so they really just loved it. I think for me, I only picked four schools that I wanted to go to. And to be honest with you, I didn't actually want to go to college, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so my mother was like, well, until you figure it out, go to school. And
Mm-hmm.
so I figured I'll apply to these four schools, and whichever one I get into, maybe that's where I'll end up. I got into all four. So then that created another problem. And then I just realized, I had such a great time at Spelman. Why not go there? And
Okay.
so it was definitely the best decision of my life.
And now you're a proud Spelman alum.
That's right.
Oh my gosh.
I should
Anyway,
have
I'm
worn my
gonna move on.
sweatshirt.
I ain't gonna get into a black college fight on this interview right now.
You're gonna lose.
I'm gonna let you cook. So, when did you decide that you might have wanted to get into the music business, the music or the entertainment business, I should say?
Well, honestly, that started back in high school. I think you talk about growing
Because
up in Harlem.
you went to school with Cameron and them, correct?
Yeah, we went to elementary school
Okay.
together, and he went to high school with my brother. So we went to school, a public school called Central Park East too, and we used to ride this bus called the Red Bus. And so Cam and my brother are in the same class, and we're friends. And so we went to school together, and my brother was like his first DJ.
Wow.
So yeah, so that was some Harlem history. But for me, I think my introduction to music period was I went to the school Central Park East that I'm talking about, and they had a violin program, and there was actually a movie about our old violin teacher. I can't remember the name of it years ago, but that was like my first introduction to music. But then also across the street from where I live in Harlem is the Harlem School of the Arts.
Mm,
So my brother was in the sports, I was in the arts, and so it was just like a quick, literally diagonal across the street, and so that was kind of like my entry into music, dance, instruments and things of that nature. But I actually got, funny enough, into music slash entertainment at 15. So my mother, I'm a Buddhist, and growing up, there was, for whatever reason, at our Buddhist center downtown in Union Square, there was a career fair. My mother asked me to go, and I didn't want to. And she said, just go and just meet one person, and then we could leave. And I was like, all right, bet. So went, and there was a woman who had this, like, this is like 1994. So she had this pretty, like, blonde hair.
mm,
And so she was very striking. And I just went up to her and introduced myself to her, and her name was Whitney. So of course, naturally, I was like, oh, well, shit,
mm.
and her name was Whitney Kyles, and she was a stylist. And so, I had never heard of a stylist before because, again, this is 1994
Yeah,
before
yeah. You don't
all
know
that
what that
stuff.
is.
So, you look at Essence magazine, you see the finished product, but you don't see the behind the scenes. And I just didn't understand. I was like, wait, I don't get it. Um, you dress people like
Yeah.
celebrities? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, why? They can't dress themselves? Like, I really could not fathom her.
Actually, a lot of them can dress themselves.
Right. And so I was just like, I don't get it. And so I just really was like, I need to see this. I was fascinated. And so I think, was tickled because of my, naiveness, but was like, all right. So I was just like, can I shadow you? Because I didn't know about internships. I was 15. And
Hmm.
so that summer, I was a stylist assistant. So I ended up working for Whitney Kyles, who worked for Harriet Cole, who's owned a company called Profundities. Harriet is
Hmm.
known for her book Jumping the Broom that came
Yep.
out like in the 90s and stuff like that. So yeah, so that summer is literally how I say I got into entertainment, because by being a stylist assistant, obviously I was dropping off clothes, picking up clothes and things of that nature. But in addition, I was on set. And so being on set, it opened me, like, that's how I found out about the group Allure. Because we did like their coverage, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm just asking questions and, not knowing that I'm talking to maybe like a product manager or a publicist. I don't know these people. I'm just there and I'm 15 and I'm asking a bunch of questions.
Fun
And
fact: one of those girls in the lure was my intern. I can't
no
remember her
way.
name now, and she was terrible. She was a fucking terrible. She was a terrible intern because she was like, "I'm in the lure. I don't even know why I'm doing this. We're about to blow up and blah 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 blah." Yeah, she was. Yeah, I'll never forget
And
that.
I know she don't feel the same way now.
Yeah, it's a little different now, but anyway.
Yeah. So anyway, like I said, so just being on set, it exposed me to so many people, and I would just be like, "Well, what do you do?" And I want to learn a little bit more of that, and that would lead to like the next internship. Next thing I know, I'm interning at Kedar Entertainment. Next thing I know, I'm interning at Motown. Next thing I know, I'm interning at Polygram Film. Like, it
Mm.
just all snowballed from that. And so by the time I got to college, again, not knowing what I wanted to do, but I had already been, so right before I was graduating from high school, I had been working at Motown.
Okay.
And we had
Are these the Gerald? Who's it? The Gerald Busby there at the time?
no, George Jackson.
Oh, George Jackson. Yeah,
Yeah,
rest in peace to
yeah,
George
yeah.
Jackson.
I love
Another
George.
Harlem guy.
Yes, and a mentor of mine. Such a great guy.
Hmm.
Um, anyhow, what happened was we had a joint venture with a company called Noontime that had a songwriter named Ashanti signed to them. And
Hmm.
so, because I had done such a great job at Motown and I really wanted to kind of keep going, because we had the joint venture and Noontime was based in Atlanta, they were
Hmm.
basically like, yo, take her and let her work for you guys while she's in school. So that's how I ended up at Noontime while I was still in school. And I ended up working for Billy Calloway, and I was doing like A&R administration and learning, a lot about like the
Hmm.
operation side of A&R. So that was like my first entry into to music while still being in school.
Wow. Another funny sidebar. So I want to. One of my people I want to get on this podcast is Noonie because he's like a ghost. He never talks. He never. But like his history is so crazy. And I signed Nivea when I worked at Jive,
Yeah.
and when I got her demos, air quotes, they were like all finished songs because she was working with Noontime.
Mm.
So like Brian Michael Cox did songs on there, like "Don't Mess with My Man" and all that stuff. Those songs were done. We didn't
Yeah.
have to do anything but put them out. Like
Yeah.
because Noontime has so many great writers and producers,
Oh,
like
absolutely.
unbelievable. Yeah,
East
Nooney's amazing.
Brian, Michael Cox, and I came up together.
Was
John
Teddy
Tay,
Bishop there?
Kenny Bishop was there.
Yep.
Also, uh,
Was Jonte there?
Jonte was there. He was like in and out. JQ was there.
EQ.
So we all like came up together during that time.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was really my entry. Like, so I was working at noontime while going to school, pledging, doing all this stuff. And then I left and I ended up working for April Love. She had a management company, and she was
Okay.
managing different producers. And it was a crazy story that led to me actually meeting LaRonda Sutton. I was reading
Mm.
her, and she really is the one who helped propel my career. Remember Jamie Foster Brown had Sister to
Of course.
Sister?
Of course. Of
Yeah.
course.
So I used to read that like religiously.
Everybody did.
Yeah, that was like where you got all your information. And
Yep.
so she used to have this section called Office with a View.
Mm-hmm.
and she would do these profile pieces on people,
Mm-hmm.
kind of similar to this, if you will. And she did one on LaRonda, and I remember I was like, "Yo, this lady is like nuts." She was working at Evans Music Publishing at the time,
Yep.
and I remember it was the first time I ever read about somebody being bicoastal, and I was like, "What's that?" And I was like, "Oh, this is crazy. I gotta do this. Like, I don't, this woman is nuts." So one day, like I said, I'm working for April and I answer the phone. Mind you, I had like a laptop and I had the magazine, Sister, with that article of LaRonda underneath like the laptop just open to that page.
Uh-huh.
And I guess maybe in some weird ways, like kind of trying to manifest. I don't know. Anyway, so she calls LaRonda.
Rwanda calls.
LaRonda calls. And I was
Wow.
like, hello. Like, you know what I mean? And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is like LaRonda said, oh my God, the lady in the magazine. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God,
The
I hope
lady in the magazine is funny.
right, and I'm just like, yo, this is nuts. I can't blow this opportunity. And I'm like, I don't know what she wants to talk to April about, but obviously she wanted to get some of the songwriters from Edmonds Music Publishing with some of her producers and,
Uh-huh.
all this thing. And I'm just like, man, I got to figure out opportunities to like talk to her, And so because she was bi-coastal between Atlanta and LA. And
Mm-hmm.
so, every time she'd call, I'd be like, hi, LaRonda. And, I was just trying to befriend her. And then finally I just got like the courage. And I was like, listen, I'm a huge fan of yours. And man, I would love to like meet you, learn from you, work for you. Da, 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 da. So one of the times that she was in Atlanta, she it was my senior year or going into my senior year, and she told me I could come by her house.
Wow.
And I was just like, wow. The crazy thing about that is she lived like right around the corner from me, which is
Really?
indicator. Like it was like literally like right around the corner, which is nuts. I mean, her house was much bigger than I was staying at, but yeah, she lived like right around the corner, so that was bizarre. And I remember standing in her living room, and I felt like I was just kind of like pouring out my life, like I want to be in the music industry. I read this article about you. You're like freaking amazing. Like, I want to learn from you. I want to work for you, blah, 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 blah. So she mentions, that she was starting a management company called All of a Sudden. And I was like, I want to come work for you. And so I started working for her management company.
Okay.
Yeah. So during that time, now this is going into my senior year of college, she transitions from Edmonds Music Publishing to Universal Music Publishing, and she's about to anyway. And so just say like now we're maybe January of 2001, and she's about to make that change. And so she's like, so what are you thinking about? Like, I'm about to move to New York, yada, yada, yada. Like, what do you think about for your future? And to be honest with you, I was like, I'm not thinking about that. Like, I'm trying to just graduate and then
Yeah.
I'll figure it
Then
out
I'll
later.
figure it out
And,
later. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I'm like, so what's your plan? What's your plan? I was like, I don't even know. Like, I'll figure it out. Like, I don't know. I just hadn't figured it out. So, and she was just trying to guide me, And so what happened was, I'll never forget. I was in a class at Morehouse. It's like a class. This guy named Dr. Anderson. It was like an easy A class. One of those things you just sit there
Mm.
and write your name and you automatically get an A. And I had my two-way pager and I opened it. It was a note. It was a message from LaRonda. So this is now probably like April, May, or whatever. And so she's like, when you graduate, you'll have a job at Def Jam as a marketing assistant.
Wow. So she
And I
set
was
it up.
what, like, and I had to like hand it to my whoever sitting next to me, like, yo, is this saying what I'm thinking it's saying? And I'm like, and they're like, well, did you interview for it? I'm like, no, like, this is, yeah.
But I mean, but back then, I think even more so than now, that's how things went a lot of times. Like, especially with the black executive community,
Hmm.
people knew each other. So it was like, yo, this person is my people or whatever. And you got a shot. Obviously, you have to take the shot and run with it. But
Right.
it's not like it's very different than now. It's like you just really got, but through the networking, you could get a lot of opportunities, back then. I mean,
Absolutely.
I don't know how it is now, but back then, that's how it kind of went.
For sure. So I'm just like, okay, I guess I'm gonna do this when I graduate. And so I ended up working for one of LaRonda's best friends, Deidre Graham, who was
Mm-hmm.
the vice president of marketing
Marketing,
at
yep.
Def Jam. And she had obviously rose up the ranks there. So I was just like, all right, bet, like this is what we're doing. And 2 weeks after graduating from Spelman, my parents moved me back up to New York, and I started working. Um,
Wow. Now, who was Def Jam? Who was running L.A. Reid and Jay Z at the time? When
no,
you,
no,
it
no.
was
This is
before
before
that.
then. Leor, Kevin.
Oh, still Leroy and Kevin.
Yeah.
So how was it working? How was it working at Def Jam in that era?
Um, it was so much pressure. I mean, it's definitely not the music industry of today. I mean, there was so much to prove. I was there with some of the biggest records came out of Def Jam. So, Jay Z's The Blueprint worked on that.
Mm.
Ludacris's Chicken and Beer, Ashanti. Worked on Ashanti's project. The Ink. All these, huge projects, and
Was that Drew Hill at the time? They were popping too.
yeah, Def Soul launched. And, I think Deidre at the time really had a lot to prove. Like I said, she moved up in the ranks and now she became this vice president of marketing. And so the expectations for her, the stakes were high. I'm a 21-year-old, literally
You were
fresh
fresh
out
out of
of college.
college.
And I didn't actually like interview, like, I didn't know what the stakes were, if,
Yeah,
if you will, because it was, dare I say, handed to me. Not to say that I didn't
but
earn
that's
it.
cool. But
Yeah.
that's okay.
But I think, yeah, and to me, it's like I knew I had to rise to the occasion because I couldn't embarrass now this my old boss who is slash a mentor, right? So I knew I had to deliver, if you will. But I mean, it was literally a haze the whole time, like completely unethical in terms of like.
Were you on? You were. They weren't on Varick at that time. They were in
No, they had finally moved
the
up to
Worldwide
85.
Plaza
Yeah,
building.
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay,
So
okay.
I was on the executive floor. I reported to Deidre. However, Leor's office was right, and I was like the second assistant for Julie, because she had an assistant. But if her first assistant wasn't there or doing something for her, I had to cover her. And then like if Leor needed something, like Marsha was like the second assistant for Kathy. So we
Mm,
were all really just like in the trenches, and it was really very much a 24-hour work cycle.
yeah,
You
yeah,
worked hard, you played hard. You got back up, like used out dinners. I'm sure you remember this. Dinners wouldn't start till like 9 p.m.
yeah. You wasn't going home at 5. That's like
No,
insanity. Like, what are
dinners
you
were
talking about?
starting at 9 p.m. Then you
Absolutely.
go out
Then you
to
might go after
club,
that. Yeah, you go out after dinner,
right? Go
and
after that,
you drag your ass home and like get a couple
and
hours of sleep, and you back up again, and
then you
next day
back
popping
up.
off again.
Right. And then, like, for me, Deidre, because she really wanted to show, that she meant business, I would have to not sometimes, I would have to get there earlier than Leor. And I was
Wow.
like, but he's got a driver and I got the C train. And it got
Yeah.
to the point where it was like so much pressure, right? The local that I contemplated just buying a pillow and a blanket and sleeping underneath my desk. Cause it was like sometimes I'd just be so tired, and it was like it's not even worth the commute because
Hmm.
I'm losing hours taking the local train back uptown.
Yeah.
You
Turn
know,
around
I
and
was
coming right back downtown.
yeah.
Yep.
So, like I said, it wasn't the best work environment, but I learned so much. But I think it was like kids managing kids. Like now, when we like Deidre and I talk about it now, we just laugh, and it was like kids managing kids. Nobody knew what they were doing. I'm 21, and now hindsight, she's what, probably like maybe 31 or 29. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
really knew what they
Yeah.
were doing. And after 2.5 years, I was like, okay, I'm done. Like, I can't.
Boy,
And
you out.
yeah. And
Wait.
so,
Before you move on to the next spot, tell me if you, without incriminating anybody or anything like that, tell me one crazy Def Jam story while you were there that you done you saw and were involved with.
I mean, plenty of Dame Dash,
Okay, tell me
tirades.
one. Tell me
I mean,
one.
no, I'm just saying, like, I don't have anything specific because they happen all the time. But it was like, where the fuck is Leo? Where the fuck is Kevin? Where's Fat Man? And being upset about something and just like, going through the hallways. I remember, so wait, there's the 27th floor, 28th, and 29th floor. I don't remember which was which, but like, I think it was the 29th floor, and you know, you had Murder Inc. and you had Rockefeller, all in the same floor. It's like you put the kids upstairs away from the
Lady
executive.
was acting crazy.
Right. It would be so crazy, so it was just always that. Just it was unpredictable. There was always somebody fighting, somebody mad at Kevin, calling him
Place
fat
games in the
man.
hall.
Right. It's just like it was so unethical. You know, the, I'm trying to think of like can't think of his name right now, but he's in jail. But I was like, Urs man, I can't think of his name right this second. But I was like, he was a nice guy to me. Supreme, Supreme. Yeah,
He used to come up there too.
yeah, all the time. I'm like, hey, Supreme, like you're such a nice guy.
Meanwhile,
Meanwhile, I'm so naive, don't know, So I mean, again, I was still so young when I think about it. I was 21, and I think I was still in this haze because I look back and I'm like, I really wasn't mature enough for that job.
none of us were.
None of us were, but
To
I'm
be
like,
honest with you,
right, right.
like they gave us like corporate cards. What are you crazy? Like, what are
I
you
used to have,
dumb?
I remember, okay, I'll tell you, not a crazy story, but it was a funny story. So we used to have this car service called Grand.
Yep.
Anyway, yeah. And I'll leave out the details about that. If you know, you know. But
Yeah.
one day, partying, and I thought I released the car. I could have swore I released the car. And up the next morning, I had to get to the office. And I'm like, why is this car still sitting in front of my apartment building? The driver was asleep in it. Apparently, I didn't release the car.
He stayed out there all night.
All night long. I was like, oh shit. Well, fuck it. Can you take me back to
Take me downtown.
back
Yeah,
to
take me
work?
downtown. Yeah. What the
I
hell?
took to work and then I released the car. But I think I was just so tired, I forgot. And it
Yeah.
was like, I think, yeah, it was probably like the craziest thing I might have done that was like, but
It's all right. They had the money. They could cover it.
right.
Yeah.
They were able to write that off and
Yeah. It's fine.
And we'll be right back. Ready to launch your podcast? Merrick Studios offers comprehensive services from concept development and seamless production to strategic marketing and monetization. Let your story take the mic. Visit merrickcreative.com/studios and let's get to work.
Master the art of lyricism with Pendulum Mink, the first school for rap. Learn elite techniques through immersive lessons, real-world exercises, and guidance from hip-hop icons. This is where MCs sharpen their skills and glow boldly on the mic. Ready to level up? Visit pendulummink.com and start your journey today.
And now, back to our show.
So wait, after Def Jam, 2.5 years of being beat up, you
yeah.
decided to go to MTV.
Yeah. So
How did
actually,
that happen?
so it was because of Gabby Peluso, who did video promotions at Def Jam. I love her to death. She is like a little angel to me. But Gabby saw how much I was getting beat up and didn't necessarily like it. And so she was like, yo, there's an opportunity, because her job as a video promotions person was to be the liaison with BET, MTV, Music Choice,
To get all the videos on the air and so on and so on.
right. So she, obviously kind of had ins to know, she's talking to them all the time about when people are looking for talent. And she was like, hey, there's this coordinator role at MTV News in the talent department, and I think you'd be great for it. And I'm like, I don't even know what a talent booker is. And so she was like, but you'll figure it out. And so there was a couple of things that I had criteria. I was like, do I have to answer anybody's phone? She was like, no. I was like, okay.
Bet.
So right. I was like, all right, everything else I could probably figure out, and her reasoning was that at the time, she was like, essentially, you just got to book acts for different programs. And at the time, all the hottest artists were Def Jam artists. So it was people I already knew that I was already
you had to connect with anyway.
Stretch.
Yeah.
Figure everything else out at the end. So I remember, getting the job, taking the job and going. And I remember for maybe at least a year or so, artists at Def Jam were so confused. Like, wait, are you here for MTV or are you here for Def Jam? And just came to the shoot. And so, eventually they figured it out. But, definitely I owe everything to Gabby Peluso. And I still thank her to this day because that really helped make the gateway for the rest of my career.
But you're leaving a huge part out. So among the industry anyway, because nobody else in the industry knew who you were, but among the industry, Whitney became very famous because at the MTV Awards, people would be pushing artists in to do interviews, and Whitney would always be in the back with a headphone on, with a headset on, and she'd be like ushering people in, ushering people out. Like she wasn't supposed to be necessarily on camera. You weren't on their talent, but you would
Yeah.
always be like right there.
Like
You'd be like,
Whitney's
that's
right
Whitney.
there. We see
Yeah,
you.
this you go right there, and like everybody be coming in and out. You know, it could be Justin Timberlake or whoever it was, Lady Gaga, whoever it was at the time, and you would always be in the back, like looking frazzled with a headset on, pushing people in and out. That was like, oh shit, they go Whitney again. Oh, MTV Awards again. We're gonna see Whitney again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I started off
You were viral.
I was viral. Exactly. And I started off as a coordinator, again, not knowing anything about television. I had an interest in it, but I learned along the way. And so through the time, like I said, I started off as a coordinator and left as a vice president, but I learned about really television production. And as, I kind of got my chops up, I was able to then be able to run the red carpets for the Grammys when it came to our stations on the Grammys, but then the VMA pre-shows and post-shows and the movie awards pre-shows and post-shows. So I was in charge of procuring, talent for those. So that was always why I was like running,
looking crazy.
Right, looking crazy and going viral.
I used to be at home like, shit, to go Whitney.
Right, running around, looking crazy. But
and you worked with some, people who are still around. Like you worked with Sway was at MTV at that time, and Joseph Patel, who's now doing massive movies with Questlove and Jason Rodriguez, like a great crew of people at that time.
Yeah, Ramon Dukes, Tuma Basa.
Tuma. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, I feel like I am so lucky. I hit the lotto when it came to, just having amazing colleagues, because it wasn't about, one person. We really moved as a unit, we were 15-15. And it was definitely like this like sorority fraternity type of thing. Like we all just moved as one unit. And I just learned so much just about work ethic.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like work. We liked staying late.
You had fun. Yeah.
Yeah, so I got my chops there, and then as I really started to begin to finally understand my job, I was able to pitch ideas and really understand what it meant to be a talent producer, knowing which artists were going to be into certain concepts. Like one of the first projects that I was able to really introduce was doing this Jay-Z Water for Life, a documentary where we went to Africa, and it was Jay's first time ever going to Africa. It started off literally as a joke. I was on the phone with his publicist, Jana Fleischman, who was an old coworker of mine at Def Jam. And we were just like, man, we should take a trip somewhere. And we're like, yeah, just shooting the shit. And so, and we're like, but like, what artist dime could we put it on? Like who, so we started going through like the marketing, like who's got stuff going on. And so she pulled all like the different artists that like had tours about to come up, and Jay's was coming up. And I said, let me take this, like it was him along with a couple other people, to our pro socials team. This guy named Ian Rowe, black guy, and see if there's any way that we can like link a cause to
a free trip, basically.
Yeah, a free trip. So like, let's see if we can find a pro-social cause that we can link it to and figure out an excuse for us to have to go.
Exactly.
So there were a couple of them, and one that stuck out was water. And so we ended up teaming up with the UN and in this cause about the play pumps. They were called play pumps. And it was this organization that helped to build these, like, think about like, not Ferris wheels, but they have these little round dollies, and kids are playing around with it. And essentially what happens is it pulls the irrigation from inside the water. And so as the kids are playing in the schoolyard, playing around in these like little circles, having fun, what it's doing is it's actually putting fresh water into this well.
So they're actually drilling for water without realizing it.
Exactly. They think they're just playing, but it's actually helping. Because what was happening was the kids were having to sacrifice going to school to get water for their families.
Wow.
So sacrificing their education. So we found play pumps. We shared the idea with Jay. he was down for it. And I got a free trip to Africa.
God bless.
And, you know,
What country did you go to?
man, I
You remember?
know oh God, it was so long ago. I know there's one where I had to have malaria pills. I can't think of it. It'll come back to me.
Okay.
But
It don't matter.
yeah. But what was really incredible about that is that, like, this, as I mentioned, started off as a joke. And next thing you know, the UN gets involved. And we're like, wait a
So it's
minute.
like, wait, yeah, what's going on? This thing is
Right.
turning
We're
like
like, wait,
dead
what?
serious.
Because they hear the
We was just trying
superstar
to go to
dudes.
Africa and hang out, and now this is getting
Right,
real.
right. And so next thing I know, we do a press conference to announce MTV partners with Jay-Z and the United Nations to bring awareness to, the the lack of water in Africa. And they're going to be shooting this documentary and coming up. And then so we shoot the documentary and then we premiere it. And mind you, this announcement was also done with the Secretary General Kofi Annan. This was like not,
Wow.
yeah, it was not like
It
some
was
like,
major.
it was major. And so we were just like, man, this was a joke that has just like spiraled out of control.
Yeah.
And then so we do the documentary, come back, and then we premiere it at the UN.
That's crazy. All
Yeah,
from a joke to try to get a free trip to Africa.
exactly.
But again, I mean, not to sound like the old fogey, but that type of thing happened a lot back then.
Yeah.
Like, things you present, an idea, not necessarily as a joke, but an idea, and it could just spiral into these major moments and major movements, because everything wasn't new then, but things were merging more.
Yeah.
Back then. Like, who ever thought that the UN would be involved with Jay-Z and Def Jam? But like, it started to merge more. Kind of people started finding common
Partnership.
ground. Yeah, and common ground with a lot of things. It was like, oh yeah, they're rappers, but they're trying to do something, and we have the resources, and so why not do it together and create awareness and so on and so on. So yeah, that's crazy.
Leverage
That's
their
a good story.
visibility to bring awareness to causes.
Yeah, that's a good
So
story.
yeah, so
Now, how long were you at MTV?
I was there for 10 years.
You were there for 10 years.
Yeah, so from 2003 to 2013 is when I left.
Wow. So you saw a lot of changes there.
So many changes. I mean, when I first started, we didn't have the internet.
Yeah.
We didn't have the internet. So to kind of launch into that and really moving away from, back in the day, there was the 10 to the hour news hits to now being digital and having artists be upset because what am I supposed to do with this link? My mother wants to see me on TV. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what this is. But I remember bringing in Adele as a new artist, bringing in Taylor Swift as a new artist. And this is like, nobody knows who you are. I brought in Lady Gaga for her, because Troy reached out to me and was like, hey, could you do You Hear It First on my new artist and just see,
see if you didn't give you any traction.
Right. So it's crazy that like, even now, a lot of these artists that are like huge megastars, they got their start with me, just taking a chance.
Doing little blurbs.
Yeah. And they add up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't realize you were there for 10 years. That's a long time. In the heyday, and really in MTV's heyday, you were there for like the real run when they went into reality television and when they, obviously TRL was a huge thing. And I still remember going to the
I remember the Jersey Shore folks, and I was like, I remember Snooki was in my office, and they were just like deer in a headlight. And I'm like, your life is about to change.
They still doing it.
Yeah. And I was like, and they were just kind of like, wait, what do you mean? And I'm like, your life is about to change, and you don't even understand. Like,
the levels.
Yeah.
I remember going to some of the VMA awards. They were really fun.
Mm-hmm.
So, everybody getting drunk and high and hanging out in the lobby, and those are good times.
Yeah.
Good times. So you left. What made you leave MTV? You got the shot to go to Revolt, or you just are ready to move on?
I saw that I was kind of starting to see the writing on the wall in the sense that, like, I felt like after 10 years, if you don't get out soon, you're going to kind of end up being stuck. And I saw that things were moving more to a digital first, and I also kept like paying attention to a lot of buzzwords that were coming, which were startups. And so I knew I wanted some startup experience, but I didn't necessarily know how to get it. At the same time, I felt like I had done everything that I could have done at MTV at that point. When I went in, I really went in as a rookie, not even basically them taking a chance on me. And I felt like as long as I read the playbook, which I did and mastered it, I was good. And at that point I was kind of like, there's nothing left to do. So I wanted to test my chops to see like, hey, I came into a place where the Bible was already written. Wouldn't it be cool to go to a place to write the Bible? You know what
Okay.
I mean? Like the
Yeah.
playbook.
Just start it up.
Yeah. And so some of my other colleagues, Ramon Dukes, Tumabasa, had courageously, decided to go to Revolt and, obviously knew me from my time at MTV. And, we've always had a great relationship. I always take care of, him and his team, whatever. And he took a chance. And so I was one of the founding executives for Revolt. And it was based in Los Angeles, but I stayed in New York and built out a team on the East Coast and the West Coast. And so, I love that experience because it was literally like, we were rolling up our sleeves and with this big idea to, no one really knew, what this was going to be. And none of us had ever come to a place where you're building something literally from scratch.
From zero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From scratch. And then I'll never forget the day where like, the countdown when we turn the lights on, like, okay,
Here we go.
And the countdown, you're just like, oh my gosh, this is happening. And that was
how was it? How was it when the lights came on?
I mean,
Yeah, right. Can you see it? Can you see it?
write the Bible. And it also gave me an opportunity to test my relationships because at that point I felt like I was starting to become Whitney from MTV. And I didn't like that. I wanted to be known as my own person. And I was like, if I really have developed true friendships and true, relationships, then I should be able to lean on those relationships in this new quest of mine. Didn't hurt that, I was working for Sean Diddy Combs.
No, of course not. But still, like, did not have that MTV gorilla behind you.
Yeah.
Every time you ask for something, because there were people going to automatically say yes,
Right.
because MTV. It's like, why would you ever say no?
Exactly.
But, with Puff, again, and the Puff is a big brand and a big entity, but it's still a new thing, and people don't quite know what it is.
Right.
Like
You're like, why would I waste my time?
Yeah, why would I do that? You'll get popping, and then I'll come back around, type thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So ended up at Revolt, and one of the best, most cherished experiences I had was sorry, that's my
That's okay.
7-month-old daughter.
Hey, baby.
Was working with Andre Harrell,
Yeah.
and I affectionately call him Uncle Andre, and he's like, I'm not your damn uncle. I think he's old. But what I loved about Andre in particular is that he really rolled up his sleeves and got dirty with us. He had this idea of like bringing back like Jack the Rapper conference, and so that ended up being the Revolt Music Conference. And I remember being like, we need more time. This can't work. And he's like, onward, we're going. And I'm like, no, this is stupid. Like,
it ain't gonna work.
Right. I'm like, oh my God, like these people are crazy. Like we need more time. It was very much a visionary, and pushed you to your limit. You know what I mean? When you felt like you couldn't do it. And, it's to this day, I'm still like, damn, we really pulled this off. But like our very first Revolt Music Conference, like we had Post Malone, we had, SZA, we had Cardi B. SZA, I think it was probably in high school. What am I talking about? But we had, I'm trying to think. Everybody that you could possibly think of that's like a huge star now, but it was like
new back then, coming up.
Right. It was just like, I remember Post Malone was like walking through the kitchen to get to the stage, and he performed like in a basically elevated banquet riser, so it was just like it was nuts to think that like we pulled this off, and all these now huge artists were just like nobodies
Yeah.
back then. They were just happy to be
Looking for an
performed.
opportunity,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I miss Andre. I mean, I talk about all the time. Like, I I was so excited when I worked in the business at a certain point, and then he knew who I was. I was
mm,
like, Andre Harrell knows my name.
yeah.
Fucking, I can't believe this guy knows my name. And of course, and we just started to develop a relationship, and through his cousin O'Neill, because me and O'Neill are still really tight. And so I'd be around Andre a lot, and he had a big ass townhouse down in the village, and we go there. And when I would see Andre, and he would just like, "Yo, just Sledge." I'm like, Andre knows my
Those my
name. This is
things.
unbelievable, because he was such a iconic figure to me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What he did in the business was just amazing.
Yeah, for
Miss that
sure.
guy. I miss him. I miss him a lot. How long did you work at Revolt?
So, now what I'll say this, I remember I told you I stayed at MTV for 10 years, and I
Yes.
realized I was like, oh, I'm gonna stay too long. So at this point I was like, I can't make the same mistake anymore. And I realized that business had been starting to change, because I'm always kind of paying attention to what's going on. And so I was like, now I need every single time I go to a place, I need to have a mission. Like, what am I there to do? And so as far as I was concerned, my mission was to see that I could build a department, see that I could build a company.
What department did you build?
I build out the talent relations department.
Talent relations. Okay.
Yeah. So I was like, and I want to demonstrate that I can launch a network. So after I did that, and we were able to get it done in 2 years, I was like, I'm out. Not because I
Wow.
was a terrible experience. It was a great experience, but I felt like
You don't want to get stuck.
I didn't want to get stuck. And I was like, I need to now really be purposeful with where I spend my time. And then at the time, I think the climate was changing where it wasn't so taboo to hop around. It was starting to not become taboo to hop around. And so again, we were digital first, but I think we were still a little behind on that. And I was like, okay, I got a little bit of experience, but I want to get a little bit more. And so I felt like the place to really go if you're going to try to learn something is like the Harvard of digital, and that was Facebook. So
how did that happen? Did you have a plug there, or you just kind of?
yes, I did actually. Old colleague of mine was working on the music partnerships team at Facebook. Who I worked with at MTV, and then the head of the music partnerships team at Facebook at the time was my old colleague who worked in new media at Def Jam. So that's why I always say it's better to be nice to everybody, because you don't know who.
You never know.
Right. And like the funny thing is, my boss, Jonathan.
That's always tell you to be nice to me.
Whatever. Anyway, Jonathan, he was like the nerd. Like he was like clunking around on his computer. And like when I was at Def Jam, nobody understood computers. He was like, get out of here, you nerds. Like, we don't care. And like they used to get sunned all the time because new media, which is essentially social, and he worked for Theta Sandiford at the time. They got no respect because nobody could understand it. But I was always nice to Jonathan. He was cool with me, like whatever. We were all in the trenches. And so he ended up actually being my boss at Facebook. And Malika, who was my coworker at MTV, we were peers at my time at MTV. I mean, excuse me, at Facebook.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like
How was it working at Facebook? Now did you have to go out to Silicon Valley a lot, or were you just
I would go out to Menlo Park, but I was based in New York. So Malika was based in Los Angeles, Jonathan was based in Los Angeles, and I was kind of like the New York arm of things, which was great. I don't think I knew what I was getting myself into. And I remember Malika warning me, like, this ain't what you think it is, and I'm thinking it's like the music industry, da, 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 da. And it very much is, but wasn't. Music partnerships. And now I really fully understand partnerships as a result of this role. Yes, you're working with artists, but really, if you will, you're kind of hawking products. You're like, hey, these are the Facebook products that are important to us. And here's what you can use to be, to connect with your most engaged fans and stuff like that. So, but it took me a while to realize, like, this is not really that sexy. But I was there at an amazing, I think I just have, knock on wood, really great timing. But I was there when we launched Instagram stories.
Wow.
And we came after Snapchat.
before we move forward, tell me a little story about that launch, Instagram Stories launch.
I remember. I'll never forget that day. Wait, where was Tuma working at the time? Tuma was like at Spotify, I think, at
Okay.
that time. And the reason why I bring that up is because I remember like him being one of the people to call me like, "Yo, y'all just went for the jugular." You know what I mean? Because Snapchat was like the hottest
Yeah,
thing.
huge.
It
Snapchat was on
huge.
fire. Yeah.
And we just like, it was super stealth mode. And I remember being in the office in New York for the launch and just people being like, yo, this is nuts. What is this? Like, I can just, use Instagram, not just for pictures, but now I can look at like,
People's lives. Yeah.
yeah. And I remember like, we just felt like the biggest champion. It was almost like winning like the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? And people were mad, obviously, our competitors and stuff like that. But I remember being like, yo, this is nuts. And it's funny because it's something that we take for granted now.
Yeah. But it had to launch at some point.
Yeah.
It wasn't always there.
So shoot, because I guess that had to be like 2015, I think. So it might be coming on like the 10-year anniversary of Instagram Stories. But now I think it's just something that people just kind of take for granted. But then also while I was at Facebook, we launched Facebook Watch, Facebook Live and Donate. So I got a chance to really understand about like the launch of products. And essentially the way our roles were, we were to the community that we were serving, which is the music community. We we were the people that they know. So explaining how to use the products, but also we were very much advocates for the artist community internally, because you got engineers who don't understand, well, why can't Beyonce just go live? Like, why not? There was a lack of understanding. So you had to basically kind of be interpreters. Like, okay, you want this, but they want this. And so has a new album coming out. How do we make it worth their while for them to help launch our product? So you get what you want, we get what we want. You know what I mean? So you're very much kind of like speaking two different languages, because you got the nerds who are just like, I don't understand what the big deal is.
Yeah, just tell them to do it. Like, what's the problem? Yeah.
But I think something that was kind of frustrating for me as a person who, like, coming into the music team, like at the time we didn't have music rights. So as we're launching all these new products and we're working with specifically musicians, we're like, hey, John Mayer, talk to your fans, but don't play your guitar.
Yeah, that's kind of like, he's like, what? Why would I do that?
Right. So, I got frustrated. I'm like, we got more money than Jesus and we can't figure out how to get music rights. And so, like, basically they could only talk and they couldn't, because we would get takedowns from the labels.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was getting frustrated, and I think it was also kind of like immaturity. And I think I was kind of also like, I'm ready to like blow this popsicle stand. This is like not really what I want.
Tired of it.
But,
yeah.
And so, but Malika tried to warn me. But I'm so grateful for it. I've learned so much, really about tech. And like I said, I went to the Harvard of tech, and I feel like, man, I jumped into the deep end of a pool and had to figure out how to swim. And I say that all to say, because then when I went to Spotify, I was like, right afterwards, I was like, this is a cakewalk.
Yeah.
Because
let's talk about that. Let's talk about the transition to Spotify.
Yeah. So Troy Carter, who I mentioned earlier, when he was managing Lady Gaga, my job has always been about relationships. And so Troy and I always remained friends and in touch. And at the time, he was the global head of artist partnerships at Spotify. And again, kind of feeling the itch that, like, I think my time at Facebook is kind of coming to an end. It had been 2.5 years, and I really wanted to get back to the music. And so I reached out to him and was like, hey, if something, pops off there, I'd love to go. Jesus, I feel like I've lived 50 million careers. So there was an opening in Well, actually, no, it was a role that was made for me, because Troy was like, hey, we were still pre-IPO at the time. So it was still a private company, but on the precipice of becoming a publicly traded company. But as we were growing, it was losing some of its mom and pop feel.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was like, the way that, like, I bring my artists to MTV, they know they know that they're in good hands. We need to kind of create this car wash feel at Spotify where people know, okay, when I come in the building, I see Whitney, I know that I'm in good hands, and
I'm gonna be
all
straight.
this stuff
Yeah.
is right. So he tasked me with doing that, and I was like, okay, bet. I can do that with my eyes closed. The challenge with that was that you were dealing with a lot of people at Spotify that didn't come. One, it was a Swedish company. Two, you're dealing with a lot of people that didn't actually come from the music industry. That didn't really understand. So I felt like, similar to like fighting engineers, as I mentioned in Facebook, I felt like I was fighting colleagues to really understand the importance of artist relations and like why it's so critical, in our business. Whereas I think a lot of times, at least my perception is at the time, it was very much they're just cogs on a wheel.
Yeah.
And so I had to do a lot of like internal educating of people on the music team, which is crazy. Engineers, and then also, dealing externally with partners and getting them excited about Spotify. Troy, I was excited about working for Troy. To learn so much about him, as an executive,
Yeah.
now being on the same side. Well, 6 months later, he left. And I was like, really, dude, you could have gave me a heads up. Like I might have, chose differently. And, I really felt that like I came there with a mission to fulfill the task that he had. And so I kind of felt a little lost at first, because it's like now it was his vision. He
Yeah,
understood.
he's not there.
Yeah, he's not there. And so for a little bit, as they were the changing of the guards and stuff, I felt a little lost and just trying to, find my way. Eventually we, got it together. Nick Holmstein ended up being the head of the music department. He brought Chaka in, Chaka Zulu.
From Disturbing the Peace.
Yeah.
So full circle Def Jam moment.
Yes, full circle Def Jam moment. My big brother loved him to death. And,
I'm getting him on here too. I talked to him the other day. I said, "You're gonna come on here."
Goodness.
He was like, "All right, I'm gonna do it.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah,
I talked to him yesterday. And so I was really excited when Chaka came, because I was like, now, like, we could really move some stuff, and do some stuff. Like tech companies, bringing in people, so they bring their people. It was just chaos for a little bit. And then eventually Chaka ends up leaving and COVID happens.
So everything gets shut down. Wait, before we go into the COVID thing, so like, what is your take on, I mean, it is what it is now, but what is your take on the merging of tech and music and how it's affected the music industry, positive or negative?
I mean, I think it was a necessary evil. I think there is, in many ways, I think the music industry was becoming very archaic in some of its practices. But, I think technology is necessary. Hold on, let me give her.
Yeah, she's disagreeing with you, that's all.
Yeah, exactly. Hold on. All right, kiddo. I need you to take a nap.
Oh, good. I knew you would like that. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna wind it up after this. No, I'm gonna do the questions, and then you'll figure out. Yeah, because the questions I think are what's gonna really help with the shorts and the reels and all that. Cool. So I'm gonna wind it with this, and then we'll do the questions. Yeah.
The problem is I've had 50 million jobs, and I could see that my battery was going to die on my computer, so I had to go to charger for that. Sorry, I think she'll go down for a nap now. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I've had 50 million jobs.
That's all right.
We were talking about
the necessary evil of tech and music mixing, merging.
Sorry. So listen, I think there's the necessary evil of tech and music merging. I think one of the things that sadly the music industry has always been is slow to adoption in all respects. You know what I mean? So, and I think it's always been a step behind, because I think people are always scared of innovation and losing their spot. Just think going from cassette tapes to CDs, you know what I mean, or vinyl to cassette tapes. It's
how they ran Napster off.
Right. So, I mean, to be honest with you, like I'll even take it a step further, but as an adjacent, MTV had the opportunity to buy YouTube and didn't. That's why Tom Preston got fired. And so that slow adoption, right? Like people are
Yeah.
always afraid to innovate. And it's like,
Yeah.
man, if you had done it,
Yeah. Shoot, I can't even imagine.
right. So it's like to think like MTV had the opportunity to buy YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Like kidding me? So yeah. So I just think that, it's a necessary evil, but I think that people didn't necessarily know like how to go about it. And I still think very much are still trying to figure it out. I'm
Oh,
still
yeah.
in that. But yeah, I think the streaming world makes it easy. One of the things I was sharing with a friend of mine is that like I do love the opportunity that streaming provides in terms of like sharing a vast array of music with different generations. My son is
Mm-hmm.
5, and he knows "Party Up" by DMX, but he also knows he listens to Frank Sinatra going to bed.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like, and that's only real talk. His favorite song right now is "It's Tricky" by Run DMC.
Wow.
Right. He's like, I met this little girly. Her hair was kind of curly. I went to her house and busted out. I'm like, but he's 5, and he heard it
Yeah.
one day because it was accidentally playing after like a Bruno Mars song in the car, and
Uh-huh.
he heard the beat and was like, "What's that?" And I was like, "This," and he's like, "Yeah," and he was like, "It's tricky," and he made me play it like 5 times. Like that is his jam.
Wow.
You know what I
That's
mean?
funny. That's
So
funny. That's
yeah.
funny.
Yeah. So his babysitter was like, "Does he know what those words mean?" I was like, I asked him if he knows what "I bust her out,"
Nah.
and he was like,
No, he's probably catching on because of the melody. It's a nursery rhyme
"Yeah,
melody. Yeah, he doesn't really trip on the words. It's the melody
right,
um,
yeah, yeah."
that kind of pushes that forward. Wait, so you leave Spotify and you go to, was it J Blocks? No, where'd you go then?
Ali, Ali, jukebox.
Jukebox. Are we counting that? Because you were there very short, right?
Yeah, no, I'm definitely counting that. So I leave Spotify. Scott Cohen, who was the head of innovation at Warner Music, leaves. He's really cool with Max Casada. Again, trying to figure out like evolution and like where music is going, and this whole NFT world and like all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And one of the people I often talk to all the time actually is Troy. And I think I call him the Oracle. I'm like, you got enough money to be the Oracle because you got time to think. You ain't got
Yeah.
bills to pay, And he and I have been talking about like the democratization of music and just like the future of music. And I didn't really necessarily understand it. And he's like, it's still early. You will. And this is still when I was at Spotify.
Mm-hmm.
And so finally, this opportunity comes, and I'm like, "Is this what you were talking about?" And I was like, "I don't think I know what." He's like, "No, you should definitely give this a try." And I'm like, "But I don't know anything about the finance side of the music industry." And so, like, I remember him trying to explain to me, like, what it meant. So finally, like, I felt like when he like dumbed it down for me, I was like, "Okay, maybe I can do this." Because I just felt like I needed to have some type
Mm-hmm.
of like, master's degree in finance and or at least a publishing background, which I had not, neither. And so I was at Jukebox for a year and a half. It was a startup company. We had like $20 million in backing. And the idea behind Jukebox is to allow retail investors to be able to buy and sell shares of artist song royalties.
Mm-hmm.
Music as an asset has become a huge profit for people, but people are buying music assets like, or rather selling, like Justin Bieber sold his catalog for $350 million. Different people are selling it, but the problem is that the average person isn't able to one have access to it and be able to participate in that.
Mm-hmm.
The idea behind Jukebox was that, and I still think it's still a little early, but ahead of its time, is that essentially they worked with rights holders. So people that were buying these huge catalogs, and you're buying at a 20, usually a 20x multiple, you're saying, hey, listen, why don't you allow the fans to be able to participate in the buying of these assets? They're just going to be a fractional owner of a royalty stream. So the idea behind that is that it helps the asset owner actually recoup their money faster. Because
Mm.
if fans are buying,
Yeah, they're buying
fractional
it.
shares
Yeah.
of it and
Yeah.
it's still performing, then they're able to then get their money back. So, And so it was fascinating for me to really like learn about a new line of business. And like, I feel like my unintentionally, but my entire career has always put me in a place where I've learned a little bit more about a different part of the business than I ever started to know about. Even from the internship as a stylist assistant, I'm on set learning about, oh, you're a product manager. What is that? You know what I mean? So I feel like my life has always allowed me to do that. And I say that, I'll just say is that that same thing actually happened with Jukebox. So the time there was very short because it was, as I mentioned, it was a startup and nothing's guaranteed. We ran out of money. But it did afford me the opportunity to learn a little bit more about finance. And it actually positioned me to where I am now.
Okay.
And
And that's at
so,
Now you're at Harborview.
right. So I'm at
Which
Harborview Equity, which is an investment firm that was started in 2021 by Sharice Clark Soros. It's Black owned, based in Newark, New Jersey. And it's an investment fund that buys assets, artists' catalogs. But one of the things that I love that we're doing is that we are building out a bigger ecosystem. We're building out a media company, we're getting into sports. And what really sets us apart as a company is that we're buying catalog, but we're also building out partnerships with artists. We've done strategic investments in Macro Media, Mucho Mas, which is a Latin a production company. We're working with Jesse Collins and Westbrook, so that as we're acquiring catalogs from different artists, that we can then pour back into them and really make the money work in a flywheel. So there's some artists that, are just like, hey, I just want to check, leave me alone, fly off into the sunset. But then there's others that are like, hey, let me, like Joseph Patel and I are working on sitting down with an artist that we recently acquired their catalog to start building out concepts for content that we can then, bring to like film and television. So it's like, it's really a full circle with that. So I love the fact that if it hadn't been for the fact that I had been at Jukebox, I mean, Sharice was also a personal friend of mine, a mom friend. But it was because of my entry into Jukebox that it helped me lead me to
transition into
Harborview.
that.
Yeah. And so, I actually had somebody compliment me recently and they were like, man, like, you're probably one of the only people in the music industry that can say they understand like the finance side, and the creative side of the music industry. I think that's a little generous. I'm still learning very much the finance side. I sit in a lot of the meetings with, capital markets and stuff. And I'm like, I have no idea what these people are saying, but I'm so grateful for the fact that I have access, to be able to learn, and I feel like I'm getting paid to have like, a master class in like finance and music that I would
you're
have
in the room. That's the main thing. You're in the room. You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So that's Whitney-Gayle Benta's story.
Yeah.
As of now.
As of now.
Yeah. See, that was very easy, Whitney. See, you have to just trust me sometimes. And don't roll your eyes. You can't. You just did it. You did it.
You say you're not using the video, so I can roll my eyes all over.
Okay. Thank you, Whitney, for coming to my show.
Sorry for being so long-winded.
No, it's all right. I mean, the people want to know what's going on. They want to know. They want to hear your story. People will get inspiration on how to move, if this is something they want to do, or other genres too. It doesn't have to be music. Just how to move and how to be smart and be open to new opportunities.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming to Mixed and Mastered, Wendy.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate it. All right. We're gonna talk offline about the other stuff. But go tend to your baby.
I will. Now,
babies with an S.
I know. Of course, now she's quiet when it's all said and done.
Exactly. So. But thank you again for coming to Mixed and Mastered, and I'll talk to you soon. And I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You can catch Mixed and Mastered on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, or wherever you get your podcasts. Hit that follow button, leave a review, and tell a friend. I'm your host, Jeffrey Sledge. Mixed and Mastered is produced and distributed by Merrick Studios.